skin. You'll look younger, smaller, lighter, fuller, tighter, thinner, softer. It really works.
I'm going to share with you a paradigm-shifting perspective on the issues of gender violence, sexual assault, domestic violence, relationship abuse, sexual harassment, sexual abuse of children, that whole range of issues that I'll refer to in shorthand as gender violence issues. They've been seen as women's issues that some good men help out with. But I have a problem with that frame, and I don't accept it. I don't see these as women's issues that some good men help out with. In fact, I'm going to argue that these are men's issues, first and foremost. Now, Obviously, there are also women's issues, so I appreciate that. But calling gender violence a women's issue is part of the problem for a number of reasons. The first is that it gives men an excuse not to pay attention, right? A lot of men hear the term women's issues, and we tend to tune it out, and we think, hey, I'm a guy, that's for the girls, or that's for the women. And a lot of men literally don't get beyond the first sentence as a result. It's almost like a chip in our brain is activated, and the neural pathways take our attention in a different direction when we hear the term women's issues. This is also true, by the way, of the word gender, because a lot of people hear the word gender and they think it means women. So they think that gender issues is synonymous with women's issues. There's some confusion about the term gender. And actually, let me illustrate that confusion by way of analogy. So let's talk for a moment about race. In the US, when we hear the word race, a lot of people think that means African American, Latino, Asian American, Native American, South Asian, Pacific Islander, on and on. A lot of people, when they hear the word sexual orientation, think it means gay, lesbian, bisexual. And a lot of people, when they hear the word gender, think it means women. In each case, the dominant group doesn't get paid attention to, right? As if white people don't have some sort of racial identity or belong to some racial category or construct. As if heterosexual people don't have a sexual orientation. As if men don't have a gender. This is one of the ways that dominant systems maintain and reproduce themselves, which is to say the dominant group is rarely challenged to even think about its dominance, because that's one of the key characteristics of power and privilege, the ability to go unexamined, lacking introspection, and in fact being rendered invisible in large measure in the discourse about issues that are primarily about us. And this is amazing how this works in domestic and sexual violence, how men have been largely erased from so much of the conversation about a subject that is centrally about men. And I'm going to illustrate what I'm talking about by using the old tech. I'm old school on some fundamental regards. I make films and I work with, high tech, but I'm still old school as an educator. And I want to share with you this exercise that illustrates on the sentence structure level how the way that we think, literally the way that we use language, conspires to keep our attention off of men. This is about domestic violence in particular, but you can plug in other analogs. This comes from the work of the feminist linguist Julia Penelope. It starts with a very basic English sentence. John beat Mary. That's a good English sentence. John is the subject, beat is the verb, Mary is the object. Good sentence. Now we're going to move to the second sentence, which says the same thing in the passive voice. Mary was beaten by John. And now a whole lot has happened in one sentence. We've gone from John beat Mary to Mary was beaten by John. We've shifted our focus in one sentence from John to Mary. And you can see John is very close to the end of the sentence, well, close to dropping off the map of our psychic plane. The third sentence, John is dropped, and we have Mary was beaten, and now it's all about Mary. We're not even thinking about John. It's totally focused on Mary. Over the past generation, the term we've used synonymous with beaten is battered. So we have Mary was battered. And the final sentence in this sequence, flowing from the others, is Mary is a battered woman. So now Mary's very identity, Mary is a battered woman, is what was done to her by John in the first instance. But we've demonstrated that John has long ago left the conversation. Now, those of us who work in domestic and sexual violence field know that victim blaming is pervasive in this realm, which is to say blaming the person to whom something was done rather than the person who did it. And we say things like, why do these women go out with these men? Why are they attracted to these men? Why do they keep going back? What was she wearing at that party? What a stupid thing to do. Why was she drinking with that group of guys in that hotel room? This is victim blaming. And there are numerous reasons for it, but one of them is that our whole cognitive structure is set up to blame victims. This is all unconscious. Our whole cognitive structure is set up to ask questions about women and women's choices and what they're doing, thinking, and wearing. And I'm not going to shout down people who ask questions about women. Okay, it's a legitimate thing to ask. But let's be clear, asking questions about Mary is not going to get us anywhere in terms of preventing violence. We have to ask a different set of questions. And you can see where I'm going with this, right? The questions are not about Mary, they're about John.
My school was fairly progressive. They even taught contraception in our sex ed class.
When I was 14, my dad handed me a box of condoms and said, you know how to use these, right?
We were taught which preventative methods were the most effective.
I was in Texas, so dad's with shotguns.
And where to go if something broke, what to take, how to fix this mess you'd gotten yourself in. We were taught about herpes and gonorrhea and syphilis and how to keep all your fluids to yourself.
My friends taught me which clinics wouldn't tell my parents.
Which ones handed out free condoms.
But I was never taught that there are worse things that could happen than a baby or a disease.
Yeah, we learned about roofies.
We learned to respect when a woman says no.
We learned about protecting your drink, carrying pepper spray.
We learned what to do when a woman is assaulted, but not that this could happen to me.
I was a virgin when I was raped for the first time.
When it happened to me, it was 10 a.m. and my parents were home. My textbook hadn't described the way I wouldn't even try to fight. There was no paragraph for how to stop her without making a scene.
There was no worksheet for how to stop him without waking my sleeping parents.
There was no correct answer to her threats of suicide when I wasn't in the mood.
There was no manual for the polite victim.
You know, it wasn't like they said it'd be.
I was sober. He was sober. We were 17.
15.
They didn't teach me that I wouldn't know how to protect myself.
That my lungs would close up and we would make pretend husband and wife, make pretend love. The thing about pretend is that it flattens everything to one color. It makes it too simple.
It makes it one syllable, and that syllable is always captioned as a yes.
They didn't teach me that I could want to be with someone, but not always want them.
That being curious about sex doesn't mean I was asking for it.
What I learned was that I was supposed to want it.
I was supposed to feel stolen. I was supposed to feel like less of a human being.
I learned that if you don't scream, no one will listen to you. They don't write about the ones that got away.
I learned that foundation comes in 14 different shades.
No one wants to hear
that your skin is changing colors.
They only ask how you're doing to hear you say fine. I learned I was supposed to feel fine. We were lovers after all.
With a love like that,
You hardly have to ask, right?
I don't want to blame my school.
I don't want to blame her.
I don't want to blame my church or my mother or even the boy.
We were just children.
But this is preventable, so
someone must be responsible for preventing it. We can teach this better. Some paintings are built from 1,000 points of color.
If you stand too close, a sunset becomes just a series of red dots.
We teach that rape is always a man in an alley.
Always a clenched jaw and a closed fist.
Always a stained white shirt.
But I never used my pepper spray.
I never had to worry about an uncle or a locker room.
Do not confuse one story for all stories. Do not stare at a red dot and say,
the whole painting is just one color.
The questions include things like, why does John beat Mary? Why is domestic violence still a big problem in the United States and all over the world? What's going on? Why do so many men abuse physically, emotionally, and verbally and other ways the women and girls and the men and boys that they claim to love? What's going on with men?